By 1980, Stanley Kubrick had already established himself as one of the most skilled and gifted directors of his generation, and it seemed that he could do no wrong. The Shining, however, at least upon release, seemed to break this trend. Though it did respectably at the box office, critic reviews were mixed, and many didn't even know what to make of it. In a review for Time magazine, Richard Schickel states that it is a daring thing the director has done. This bleaching out of all the cheap thrills, this dashing of all the hopes one brings to what is, after all, advertised as a masterpiece of modern horror. Schickel raises an important point here. The film was, and still is, not a horror film in the conventional sense. Rather, The Shining is Kubrick's unique twist on the horror genre. He takes a much more nuanced approach in his style, eschewing the so-called cheap thrills that Schickel cites for a deeply unsettling form of psychological horror. Throughout the film, Kubrick uses multiple aspects of film form to manipulate the thoughts and feelings of the audience, many of which have already been dissected by other film analysts. However, for this essay, I'd like to focus on an aspect of this film that is often overlooked, which is its use of color. Color, whether the audience is aware of it or not, can greatly affect the significance of a character or scene. Natalie Kalmus, the former color supervisor for Technicolor, addressed the importance of color in her article Color Consciousness. One of her main arguments is that the psychology of color is of immense value to a director. His prime motive is to direct and control the thoughts and emotions of his audience. The director strives to indicate a fuller significance than is specifically shown by the action and dialogue. She continues to state, "The psychology of color is all important in this respect." This is important as we examine patterns of color in The Shining. The repeated use of colors, as well as their juxtaposition, often help to create a nuanced symbolism that may not be immediately explicit in the narrative. Additionally, it may serve as a way to either foreshadow or alternatively even act as a red herring for major events later in the film. One of the most striking patterns of color in this film is the consistent use of red and blue in the outfits of both Wendy and Danny. In their first scene, they are introduced to the audience together, wearing outfits with strikingly similar color schemes. The bright shades of red and blue are undeniably eye-popping, especially considering that we see Jack just before this, wearing a relatively drab combination of grays and dark greens. So what does this color combination mean? Well, if we look to Kalmus, she explains that colors fall into two general groups. The first group is the warm, and the second the cool colors. Blue, of course, falls into the so-called cool color category, which she explains is usually tranquil and passive. Though we've just been introduced to these two, the prominent use of the color blue seems to indicate that they are good, well-meaning characters. However, red is a warm color, almost on the opposite end of the visible color spectrum. It also carries quite different connotations, as Kalmus explains that red calls to mind a feeling of danger, a warning. It may seem early in the film to draw this conclusion, but this interpretation is actually supported very quickly by the narrative. In fact, the very next scene features the manager, Mr. Ullman, informing Jack of a horrifying incident regarding one of the previous caretakers.
Well, my predecessor in this job hired a man named Charles Grady as the winter caretaker. And he came up here with his wife and two little girls, I think about 8 and 10. And he had a good employment record, good references. And from what I've been told, I mean, he seemed like a completely normal individual. But at some point during the winter, he must have suffered some kind of a complete mental breakdown. He ran amok and he killed his family with an axe.
However, Jack assures Ullman that he has nothing to worry about.
Well, you can rest assured, Mr. Ullman, that's not going to happen with me.
Soon after this, we see Danny getting ready to brush his teeth. We then meet Tony, who Wendy later explains is Danny's imaginary friend. Danny asks Tony why he doesn't want to go to the hotel.
Tony, tell me.
In this first instance of Danny's shining ability, we of course see the iconic elevator of blood, but briefly intercut with this footage is a shot of two seemingly twin girls. Notice that they are both wearing light blue dresses. Interestingly, right after the river of blood obscures the camera, the first shot we see prominently features Wendy standing almost center frame wearing her blue dress. The twin girls are given slightly more screen time about 20 minutes into the film, when Danny sees them again briefly in the games room. After this appearance, they go unseen for a while. However, Kubrick constantly plants seeds in the viewer's minds by consistently using the blue and red color scheme in Danny and Wendy's outfits. At around 50 minutes into the film, Danny is seen riding his big wheel around the hotel. As he gets ready to round a corner, we get a better look at his outfit, which features a solid red hoodie. This is important because it is by far the most red any character has worn up until this point, and it foreshadows what's about to come. He may seem to be lacking the color blue, however the seat back of the big wheel is a very similar color to the dresses of the twins. This is no mistake, as once he rounds the corner, the twins appear in front of him in one of the scariest so-called shining moments in the entire film. The film then flashes images of the twins murdered and drenched in blood. Though graphic, the scene is very important for a few different reasons. First, it confirms the suspicion that these twins were indeed the murdered girls that Ullman mentioned earlier, and by extension, it also explains why they were then intercut with the River of Blood sequence. Perhaps more importantly, though, it serves to foreshadow Danny and Wendy's possible fate. It is no coincidence that Danny's blue suspenders or Wendy's blue dress are layered over red articles of clothing. The red in these cases are essentially bleeding through. By this point in the film, Jack has become mentally unstable, and it starts to seem very possible that he could snap and kill his family in the same way that Grady did. Though this possibility becomes more explicit further on in the film, Kubrick cleverly uses these patterned colors in the first hour to subconsciously guide the audience to this ever-growing connection. Whether they actually suffer this same fate as the twins, however, is left for the viewer to find out.